Last summer, I took a night shift at the old hospital. I've been a nurse for almost a decade, but this place was different. It felt strange, almost like stepping back in time. The hospital's old wing was dim and quiet, with old equipment gathering dust. Sometimes I felt I was the only person left in the world. On my third night, around 2 a.m., I noticed the lights flickering at the end of the corridor. It was odd, but I shrugged it off as a faulty generator. Still, I had this nagging feeling. Something told me to check it out. So I grabbed my flashlight and walked down the hall. As I approached, the blue glow flickered again. A chill ran down my back. I thought maybe it was just the cold air playing tricks on me. Then I heard a soft noise. Maybe footsteps? I stopped. My heart raced. I was alone, right? The first week continued like that. The flickering lights became more frequent, turning on and off without reason. I kept hearing strange noises too. Sometimes I thought I heard wheels rolling through the darkness. I felt watched, but each time I looked, there was nothing. Shadows seemed to move just out of sight. I wanted to leave my post, but instead, I felt pulled deeper into whatever was happening. One night, I stepped out of the nurse's station once more. The air felt thick around me. I walked slowly, trying to listen and understand. Suddenly, I heard it, a whisper, and it called my name. I froze. I don't think I ever felt that sick before. I didn't recognize the voice. How long I stood there, I don't know. But then I took a breath and turned back. When I reached the nurse's station, the lights were flickering wildly. My hands were shaking. That's when I caught sight of it, a figure standing at the end of the hall. I blinked, and then it was gone. I thought I was just tired. One evening, as I sat at my desk, I called my best friend. I told her everything, the lights, the sounds, the figure. At first, she laughed. "It's an old hospital, Em. It's creepy." But that didn't comfort me. I could feel the pull into fear. Then I heard the whisper again. It was softer this time, just behind me. I turned slowly, and my breath caught in my throat. I swear I saw something move. I couldn't be sure. I really didn't know what it was. But in that moment, I understood. I was all alone. Each night seemed to blur into the next, questions lingering in my head. Was it just my mind playing tricks? But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Finally, I made a decision. I would finish out my week, but I wouldn't forget the things I felt and saw. I still think about it, even now. I don't know what happened back then, but it haunts me. The start of my second week, I noticed something unusual. The whispers had become a steady murmur, rising and falling like a wave. Each night, they seemed to surround me, but I couldn't decipher their meaning. I caught myself straining to listen, hoping to grasp just one word, one clue. That night, as the clock struck 1, I felt the oppressive quiet settle around me like a heavy blanket. I decided to step out for another walk to clear my head. I remembered the old supply room down the hall, and a part of me wanted to explore it. Maybe there I would find something, for comfort or at least a distraction. I walked slowly, flicking my flashlight back and forth, illuminating faded posters of long-past patients. The air felt different here, stale and thick. When I reached the supply room, I hesitated. My instincts told me to turn back, but my curiosity pushed me forward. With a deep breath, I opened the door. It creaked loudly, echoing in the vacant hallway. Inside, everything was covered in dust. Shelves full of archaic medical tools towered over me, casting long shadows. I ran my hands over the surfaces, feeling the grit and neglect. That's when I saw it, a small old notebook lying askew on one of the shelves. I picked it up, wiping off the dust. My heart raced as I opened it. The pages were filled with scrawled handwriting, detailing patient care and daily observations. But as I flipped through, I realized the entries grew darker. Names, dates, various symptoms. The last entry struck me like lightning. Patient claims to hear voices. They know my name. My stomach dropped. I glanced back toward the door, suddenly feeling trapped. What happened to that patient? Why had they written that? Before I could process it, the air in the room changed. I shivered as I heard a whisper behind my ear, the words barely audible but crystal clear. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, but there was nothing. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My heart raced and I stumbled back toward the door. I needed to get out. I bolted down the hallway, my breaths coming in quick gasps. The whispers rose around me, swirling like a storm. I reached the nurse's station, panting, and slammed the notebook onto the desk. It felt too heavy, too ominous, almost like a curse. What was happening? As I steadied my breathing, I caught a glimpse of something at the end of the corridor again. A figure, shrouded in darkness, observing me. My skin prickled. I blinked, and it was gone. But that wasn't all. I could still hear the whispering. Not just a sound. It felt like a warning, something desperate. Then, everything went dark, the lights flickering out completely. I was left standing in total silence, engulfed in a void where shadows danced. I was trapped. I could feel my heart race again, pounding against my ribcage. I had to
find a way out, but I also knew I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't know how long I stood there in the darkness, panic clawing at my chest. I shuffled forward, searching for the nurse's station, but the echoes of my footsteps felt eerie and disorienting. I could still hear the whispers, louder now, as if they were circling around me, filling the empty space. "Stop it," I whispered to myself. I needed to think. The flashlight hung limply from my hand, its beam struggling against the pitch black. I took a breath, forced myself to focus. The old supply room. I hadn't finished examining the notebook. There might be something useful, maybe even an explanation. With determination stemming from frustration, I turned and retraced my steps, fumbling along the wall for guidance. The air felt colder, thicker, like something was watching me. When I reached the supply room door, I hesitated only briefly before pushing it open once more. The hinges groaned, and the musty smell hit me like a wave. I flicked my flashlight around, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. There was it, the notebook. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it again. I flipped through the pages. Each entry seemed to draw me in closer, revealing a descent into madness. Most of them were mundane, details about medications and symptoms, but one entry caught my eye again. The voices are angry now. They demand to be heard. My skin prickled. I wasn't just reading about someone else's experience anymore. It felt personal. I could almost hear the desperation in that handwriting, feel the fear behind it. I moved to the last page, which had several hastily scribbled notes packed into a small margin. "Don't make them angry. Find the source." I froze. What source? The whispers? The presence? That was when I heard it again, closer this time. It wasn't just a whisper. It formed into words. "Help us." My heart leapt into my throat. I swung around, shining my flashlight into the corners of the room. Nothing. The shadows were shifting, but I couldn't distinguish shapes. It felt like they were lurking, waiting. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The only response was more whispering, echoing against the walls. I took a step back, feeling like I was suffocating. "You want help? What do you want?" The whispers intensified. They felt urgent, almost chaotic, as if they were trying to communicate something important. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to block out the noise. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on. The stark fluorescent bulbs buzzed angrily, flooding the room with harsh light. I felt momentarily disoriented. Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard a crash from down the hall. I turned towards the noise, every nerve in my body screaming for action. I couldn't ignore it. I had to see what was happening. As I moved towards the sound, a figure stepped out from the shadows, face obscured. My heart dropped. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, voice low and gravelly. I stumbled back. Was I dreaming? "Who are you? What did you mean?" But the figure just pointed behind me, and in that moment, everything shifted again. I turned, and the whispers rose to a deafening volume, drowning out everything else. Fear gripped me. There was no turning back. I had to confront whatever this was, or I wouldn't leave this hospital alive. The whispers morphed into a chorus of frantic voices, filling the cramped supply room. My heart raced as I turned back to confront the shadowy figure. But it was gone, vanished into the corners of my mind that weren't ready to acknowledge its existence. I raised the flashlight again, scanning the walls, hoping for something, anything, that could explain this madness. The light landed on an old, faded poster pinned crookedly to the bulletin board. "Help is always available," it read, but the frayed edges and skewed lettering made it look sinister. The whispers momentarily quieted, as if they too were demanding my attention. I stepped closer, heart pounding, to read the fine print below. "If you hear them, listen," it said. "They know the way." Listening was the last thing I wanted to do. I felt exposed, as if the shadows were closing in on me. The whispers picked up again, swirling with urgency. I took a deep breath and yelled, "What do you want from me?" A sudden crash echoed from the hallway outside, sending my heart into overdrive. What was happening? I was sweating now, gripping the flashlight tightly. I had to decide, stay and dig deeper here, or face whatever had caused that noise. Against every instinct telling me to run, I now believed there was something I needed to uncover. I had to find the source the notebook had mentioned. I turned to leave the supply room, bracing myself as I stepped into the dim corridor again. The air felt thick. The whispers whispered warnings of things hidden just out of sight. My flashlight flickered. I tightened my grip, steadying my breath. The last thing I needed was to be left in darkness again. As I progressed down the hall, the overhead lights buzzed, flickering erratically. I avoided looking behind me, terrified of what I might see. The crash had sounded more angry than accidental. My pulse raced with each step. I could feel it, something lurking just beyond my vision. Then, as I neared the nurse's station, I spotted a dark stain on the floor. My stomach churned as I realized it was blood, dried and old, but still vivid against the concrete. My breath quickened, and I instinctively turned my flashlight down the corridor. That's when I saw it. A door slightly ajar at the end of the hall, a thin stream of light spilling out. The whispers quieted to a near-silent hum, as if they anticipated what I would do next. I hesitated. Whoever, or whatever, was in there could be the very source of the voices. Inching closer, I felt a chill race down my spine. "Help us," came a voice, almost a whisper. Was it real, or just in my head? I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling as I prepared to push it open. Fear and curiosity warred within me. What awaited inside could change everything. All at once, the lights flickered one last time, then went dark. A cold dread swept over me. I was not alone. I swung the door open, holding my breath, and stepped into the unknown. The room was dim, illuminated only by a single flickering light bulb overhead. I could barely make out shapes and shadows as I stepped inside. A metal table sat in the center, covered with sheets stained in some unrecognizable substance. My pulse quickened. I felt like I'd walked straight into a nightmare. Who's there?" I stammered into the darkness, my voice trembling more than I intended. "Show yourself." No answer came, but the whispers surged once again, echoing chaotically, as if they were a part of the room itself. I turned my flashlight towards the far corner. That's when I saw them. Figures huddled in the shadows, their faces contorted with fear. "Help us!" they cried in unison, their voices melding into a cacophony that made my skin crawl. I blinked, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. They looked like patients. Their eyes held a desperate pleading as they reached toward me,
but they were tethered to the darkness like phantoms. I took an instinctual step back, fearing I might be losing my grip on reality. "This can't be happening," I whispered. My mind was a jumble. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing it all to disappear. When I opened them again, the figures were gone, leaving only the faint rustling of sheets behind. Just the sound of the buzzing light and the whispering voices, the urgency building. I needed to keep moving. Something here felt very wrong, like I had stumbled into something dangerous. I approached the table, my curiosity outweighing my fear. In the dim light, I could make out the outline of a notebook and a few crinkled pages. I grabbed it, flipping through the pages frantically. The handwriting was messy, frantic, more warnings, more pleas. "Don't listen to them," one entry read. "They'll lead you to despair." Despair. The word hung in the air around me, thick and oppressive. I needed to leave, but the pull of the whispers felt stronger. They became insistent, coiling in a way that tugged at my mind. I couldn't just ignore them, not after what I'd seen. My breath quickened at the thought of learning more about these figures. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from behind me. I whipped around, holding my flashlight steady, but only darkness met my gaze. I had an overwhelming urge to run, but I felt drawn to stay, to uncover the truth hidden in this madness. "Please find us."
There it was again. Find us. My gut twisted. I needed to confront whatever was happening here, but losing myself to the darkness wasn't an option. I took a step forward, and as I did, the cold air pressed against my skin like icy fingers gripping my heart. Then, without warning, the floor beneath me shifted. I barely held my footing as the ground trembled. The lights flickered faster now, and I felt a wave of energy surge around me, a storm waiting to break. "Help is always available," the familiar phrase echoed, mocking me now. Was there truly a way out, or was it all a trap? I stumbled backward. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something shift behind the table. Was it another figure, or something far worse? It was now or never. I turned to the door, ready to escape, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The whispers crescendoed into chaos, drowning out all rational thought. This was more than I anticipated. I stood frozen, heart racing, fingers trembling on the flashlight. The door was solid, unyielding, and I could feel the weight of something familiar press against my back. The whispers pushed and pulled at me, a suffocating blanket of sound. "Help us," they insisted, the urgency clawing at my mind. Adrenaline surged through me, urging me to act. I needed to find a way out. With a deep breath, I turned back to the table. There was still the notebook, open to the page that spoke of despair. But something in the shadows caught my eye again. I stepped closer, drawn by the flickering light that danced just beyond my reach. That's when I noticed a small object lying on the floor, partially hidden under the metal table. I squatted down to get a better look. It was a key, rusted and jagged, its shape unfamiliar. My mind raced with possibilities. Could it unlock the door, or was it part of something much more sinister? Grasping the key tightly, I rose, but before I could advance, the floor trembled again. This time, a sound erupted, a low growl, echoing ominously from the darkened corners. My stomach dropped as the fear washed over me anew. Was I really alone here? The growl intensified, each rumble vibrating the air like a warning. I shone the flashlight in every direction, heart pounding painfully in my chest. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to maintain a bravado I didn't feel.
The only answer was a harsh whisper, weaving through the shadows. "Stay, please stay." No, this wasn't right. I was meant to escape, not become a prisoner here. Gripping the key, I dashed to the door, heart in my throat. I remembered the notebook's warning. Despair crept in to fill the spaces where hope once thrived. I had to focus. I had to believe there was a way out. But as I approached the door, the shadows broke apart, revealing a figure draped in
darkness, eyes glinting with a feral intensity. I couldn't breathe. My muscles froze. This wasn't a trick of the mind. It was real. Instinct kicked in, and I thrust the key toward the lock, desperation fueling my movements. Just as I made contact, the figure lunged. I barely dodged aside, adrenaline pushing me forward in a frantic rush. The key slipped from my fingers, clattering to the ground. I turned to face the being that had emerged from the darkness, my heart hammering so loudly I thought I might be sick. Then, everything went quiet. The whispers faded into a chilling silence, leaving room for a more ominous presence. It glared at me, a confrontational silence that filled the air. I had no idea what it wanted, but I could feel its malevolence wrapping around me like a noose. I backed away slowly, unable to pull my gaze from it. I had to get out. I had to find the key. Before I could decide my next move, the whispers surged back, time distorting, as if I was caught in the grip of something beyond my understanding. "Find us," they urged, echoing through the dimness. I felt a pull, and it was stronger than before. My fingers brushed the cool floor as I knelt to retrieve the key. But the figure moved closer, its presence undeniable and suffocating. Just as I grasped the key, I caught movement at the corner of my eye, a door right beside the figure that hadn't been there before. I turned, my instincts flaring. This moment felt like a chance. It was now or never. I was running forward, but I realized the figure wasn't pursuing me. It stood still as I plunged for that door, hoping for a miracle. The last of the whispers faded behind me, replaced by a haunting silence, the key clutched tightly in my hand. Then, as I reached for the doorknob, I heard a faint whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." The weight of those words followed me as I pulled the door open and stepped into the unknown. I stumbled through the door and found myself in a long, dimly lit hallway. The air was thick and stale, the walls peeling with age. The faint glow of the flickering lights cast eerie shadows that shifted with every step. My mind was racing. I had escaped one horror and entered another. I shone the flashlight down the corridor, squinting against the darkness. I could see doors lining both sides, some slightly ajar. A chill ran down my spine. Were these rooms filled with more secrets? More ghosts of despair? Each door felt like a portal to another story of anguish. "Keep moving," I whispered to myself, trying to shake off the dread pooling in my stomach. The last thing I wanted was to linger in a place that felt so devoid of life. As I pressed on, the whispers grew faint, but remained a haunting echo just beyond my comprehension. Suddenly, a thud reverberated from somewhere nearby. I stopped dead in my tracks, heart racing again. I turned toward the noise, flashlight beam shaking in my grasp. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and brittle in the suffocating silence. My instincts screamed at me, not to go towards the noise, but to run. Yet something compelled me to investigate. As I rounded a corner, I saw it. A door at the end of the hall swung ever so slightly inwards. My breath caught. Was someone else here? Had the figure followed me? I hesitated, weighing my options. But just as I turned to backtrack, another sound cut through the air. A low moan, almost human. Instinctively, I stepped forward. Curiosity and fear battled within me. I reached the door, heart pounding louder than ever, and paused to listen. The moaning continued, a blend of agony and longing that tugged at my heart.
It was a desperate sound, one that called for help, or perhaps it was an invitation to something darker. I pushed the door open cautiously. Inside, the room was dark, cluttered with old medical equipment, patient files strewn about like forgotten memories. The walls were lined with images of happier times, people smiling in sterile gowns. But the atmosphere felt heavy, like the weight of unfulfilled stories lingered in the air. Then a figure appeared in the corner. It was a woman, pale and ghost-like, her eyes wide with sorrow. "Please," she rasped, "you have to find them. They're lost." I could hardly comprehend her words, but it struck a chord deep within me. The whispers? Were they connected to her? I opened my mouth to ask who she meant, but the sound of a creaking door jolted me. I couldn't help but turn back toward the entrance. The door slammed shut. Panic washed over me as I rushed to the handle, but it wouldn't budge. My heart raced. The woman's eyes widened in fear as she whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." That sound again, the thud. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. The urgency of her warning etched itself into my mind. I had to escape. But then I heard her voice again, softer this time. "Help them." A new resolve ignited within me. I could feel the walls closing in, but if I stayed any longer, I'd be swallowed whole. I had to figure out a way to get out of this room, but more importantly, I had to understand who the them was, or risk joining them in this nightmare. I glanced back at the woman, desperate for answers, but the moment pierced the shadows like a knife, and in the next breath, the room went dark. The darkness swallowed me whole. I stood frozen, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on my chest. I waved the flashlight in front of me, but the beam flickered and died, plunging me into complete blackness. The only sound was the rising thump of my heartbeat.
Ears. I needed to move. The door was behind me, and the time to escape was now. I fumbled backward, hands outstretched, praying I'd find the handle. Panic surged as I stumbled over something on the floor, a pile of papers that scattered like fallen leaves under my feet. The thud from earlier rattled the door again, a harsh reminder that something was trying to breach this fragile refuge. My breath hitched. "Help them," the woman had said. Who were they? I didn't have the luxury to ponder the answer too long. Finally, I found the handle. I turned it with all the strength I had, but it resisted like a stubborn child. I was trapped. I slammed my shoulder against the door, adrenaline coursing through me. It rattled but didn't give. I was about to wrench it open again when a soft sobbing broke the silence. The sound sent shivers down my spine, drowning out my own fear. I turned back, still half hidden in the shadows. The woman stood there, more solid yet more ethereal than ever. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I realized they weren't just sorrowful. They held a plea for whatever was lost. "Please," she whispered again, "the children they're in danger." Children? My mind spun. I hadn't seen any children. I'd only encountered her. My thoughts raced, as if trying to connect the dots in a puzzle. I had to understand. "Where are they?" I asked, the words spilling out before I could hesitate. "Below," she replied, her voice trembling. It came out like a fragile breath. Before I could ask her what she meant, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. The shock wave sent me stumbling backward. The door buckled against the force. In that moment, I dropped to my knees and strained to see through the oppressive darkness that surrounded me. Then, everything changed. A beam of light burst forth from the corner of the room, revealing the woman's face twisted in fear. My heart raced again. I turned my head toward the doorway, instinct screaming at me to brace for what was coming. Suddenly, the door burst open, throwing splinters of wood into the room. A figure loomed in the entrance, dark and monstrous. The light outside poured in behind it, revealing just enough for me to recognize the familiar shape. My stomach dropped as I recalled the silhouette from the hallway earlier. "Run!" the woman cried. "You don't have much time." I sprang to my feet, adrenaline pushing my body into motion. I didn't know if I would get out. I didn't even know what to expect. But in that moment, only one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. I bolted from the room, my feet pounding against the cold floor. I didn't have time to look back, but I could feel the heavy presence behind me, pushing me forward. The woman's warning echoed in my mind. The children are in danger. Where could they be? I skidded
to a stop at the end of the hallway, breathless. The corridor stretched before me, dimly lit by flickering lights that cast long, haunting shadows. I hesitated, looking left and right. Panic surged again. I turned left, remembering a set of stairs from my last visit to the hospital. It felt like the only choice. I raced down the narrow hallway, heart thrumming wildly. Every step felt like a countdown. The echoes of my footsteps intertwined with sounds from behind me, the scraping of something hard against the ground, a low growl like thunder. I quickened my pace, nearly losing my balance as I rounded the corner. There it was, the door to the stairwell. The steel frame loomed ahead, and I hurled myself at it. The handle was cool to the touch as I yanked it open and plunged into darkness again. I slammed the door behind me, feeling the weight of it impact like a barrier between me and whatever was pursuing me. The stairwell was eerily quiet, only the sound of my breathing and the distant creaking of old metal grates. I started down the stairs, half stumbling in the gloom. My hands brushed against the cool banister as I descended, trying to steady myself. With each step, I wrestled with a growing sense of dread. The woman's words haunted me. What danger were the children in? Were they even here? I felt a strange need to know, but fear twisted my stomach. As I reached the bottom of the steps, I paused, peering into the darkness beyond the doorframe. It felt impossibly empty. But before I could think too long, a faint sound pulled my attention. A soft whimper, barely audible, but unmistakable. I pushed the door open slowly. The room before me was a dusty storage area, filled with forgotten medical equipment and old boxes. I drew closer to the sound, moving quietly, unsure of what I would find. "Hello?" I called softly, hoping for an answer. Another whimper, this time louder. It came from a dim corner. My heart raced as I stepped forward. I wasn't prepared for what I found. That's when I saw it, a small figure curled up in the shadows, a young child hiding under a tattered curtain. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by fear. I glanced back toward the door. I could sense the weight of the darkness gathering, as if something was watching. "Hey, it's okay," I said gently, crouching down. "I'm here to help you." But as I reached out, the child froze, wide eyes locking onto mine. Then, without warning, the air around us shifted. The murmurs grew louder. My instincts screamed that we weren't alone. I turned back, dread pooling in my stomach. The door was still closed, but I felt an impending presence creeping closer. I needed to get the child out, but could I even do that without knowing what was waiting for us? "Stay close," I instructed, but I sensed that time was running out. Already running out. I knelt beside the child, trying to project calmness while chaos swirled around us. "What's your name?" I whispered, hoping to coax them into trust. "Lily," the child replied, her voice trembling, but it was clear she was scared, clinging to the curtain as if it were a lifeline. The darkness swirled unsettlingly, threads of shadows creeping along the walls. "Lily, we need to leave this place, okay? Can you stand?" She nodded slowly, but her body remained rigid, still hiding. The murmurs outside grew louder, morphing into a shrill cacophony that gripped my heart like a vice. I could feel them pressing against the walls, as though they were alive and aware of our presence. I risked a glance back towards the door, swallowing hard. A shiver of dread ran through me. Time was slipping away, and if I didn't act fast, whatever was outside would make its move. "Listen, we're going to get out of here, I promise, but I need you to trust me." Lily's eyes searched mine for assurance, and for a fleeting moment I felt a connection, a shared understanding of fear. "Okay." Her small voice barely carried above the whispers, but conviction began to flicker in her expression. I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her tiny fingers clutch around mine. Together we pulled ourselves upward, my heart pounding in anticipation. We had to get back to the stairs, but the path felt like an endless corridor lined with unseen horrors. Gently, I led Lily towards the door, keeping my flashlight at the ready. Each creak of the floorboards echoed like a warning bell. I felt the shadows closing in, sensing that whatever had been watching us was waiting for the right moment. "Stay close," I murmured again, gripping her hand tighter as we approached the door. We reached it, a barrier between us and the unknown. I took a breath. On 3, we go. 1, 2. Before I could say 3, a loud crash came from behind us, louder and more violent than before. The door rattled in its frame, causing my heart to race and Lily to whimper. I didn't even wait for the crash to repeat. "Now!" I shouted, bursting through the door with Lily at my side. The dim light of the stairwell washed over us, and as I took the first step downward, I felt something cold brush against my back, a fleeting touch that sent ice down my spine. Ignoring the sensation, I propelled us down the stairs. "Run!" I said, pushing Lily forward ahead of me as we barreled towards the exit. The staircase spiraled downward, the darkness behind us alive with movement. Just as we neared the bottom, the whispers roared, insistent and chaotic, a thrumming chant that filled my ears. I pushed open the door at the base of the stairs, adrenaline urging my feet to fly. But the room beyond wasn't empty like I'd hoped. Dimly lit, it was filled with crates
and old furniture stacked haphazardly. Shadows loomed across the walls, twisting and contorting, and for a moment I felt uncertain of our path. "Over there," I said, pointing towards a door on the far side of the room. "We have to go." As we dashed toward it, I glanced behind us just in time to see vague outlines in the shadows, figures emerging from the darkness. My breath hitched as panic surged within me, but I pushed forward, pulling Lily along with me. "Almost there," I urged, reaching for the door handle. Just as my fingers closed around it, I felt a cold draft wash over me, wrapping around us like a shroud. The whispers crescendoed, drowning out my thoughts with agonizing pleas. "Help us!" Ignoring the sensation of dread twisting in my gut, I yanked open the door. Bright light flooded in, momentarily blinding me. "Lily, come on," I shouted, but I hesitated at the threshold, heart racing. The figures behind us had halted, but loomed close, the energy crackling around us. The echoes of their trapped sorrow resonated through the air. They reached out as if trying to pull us in, but their forms were indistinct and shrouded in the void. Then something flickered across my vision, racing past the figures. For a moment, I could see them clearly. Faces of lost souls, eyes wide with a mix of terror and sorrow. They too were crying out for help, and I felt the urgency swell within me, threatening to consume me whole. "Please, don't leave us," they begged in unison, voices blending into a haunting symphony. In an agonizing heartbeat, I understood their desperate plea. I couldn't abandon them either, not while they were trapped here. But did I have the strength to confront whatever darkness held them captive without risking my own life? Lily tugged at my sleeve, pulling me towards the light. "We have to go." "Right," I replied, tears stinging my eyes. I had to push through. I could help them, but I had to survive first. I took a breath and stepped into the light, dragging Lily along with me. "Hold on tight." As we crossed the threshold, a force slammed against my back, the figure screaming in fury or despair. But Lily and I pressed on, the light enveloping us like a promise of safety. In that moment, somewhere distant, the whispers faded into a quiet murmur, leaving behind a lingering echo of loss. I turned back for one last glimpse, but the door closed behind us, sealing the darkness away once and for all. We landed on the other side, gasping in fresh air. The world outside was brighter, and I felt warmth flood through me. But as reality settled back in, a gnawing uncertainty remained. What had we left behind? Were those voices truly trapped, or was it all simply a figment of the mind? I reached down, squeezing Lily's hand. "We're safe now," I said, but deep inside, a part of me knew that I might never be at peace with the choice I had made. As we walked away from the building, I cast one last glance at the hospital, a silent sentinel of all the secrets it still held. I shivered, knowing that some questions would remain unanswered.
Sometimes I still think about it. I moved to a different city shortly after, but I can't help wonder if those shadows still linger in the old hospital, waiting for someone to hear their stories. What tales linger in the silence? The boundaries between light and dark can be misleading after all.